The first one is Melissa Geisig. Can you hear us, and can you say hi so we know you're there?
Hi everyone, I can hear you well. Can you hear me?
Yes, sounds good.
Yeah,
and
great.
Then the next one is Jingjiang. Jing, can you hear us?
Yes, yeah, I can hear very clearly.
Okay,
yeah,
that's great. And then Preeti.
Hi, yes, I can hear you. Nice to see you, Nancy. Am I audible?
Sorry, yes, I can hear you.
Am I audible? Yes. Okay.
Yes. And then Tatsuya, are you there?
Hello. Yeah.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. And I'm, yeah, can you hear me?
I hear a little bit of noise.
Can you hear me clearly?
Now it's better. Is that better for everyone?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, cool. And then Kate.
Yeah, hi there. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Yeah, and then I think we heard Clarence.
Yep.
You wanna?
Hello,
Yeah.
hi.
Okay.
Can you hear me clearly? I hope it's okay.
Yes, sounds good. And Olivia.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, seems okay. And Chanelli.
Hi, Nancy, can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, that sounds
Excellent.
good. And then Lori.
Yep.
Okay, so I think we can go ahead and start. And
Bhuvina is here.
Oh, is Bhuvina here?
Yeah, hi Nancy, I'm here.
Oh, hey, hi. Oh, great, you made it. Okay, that's excellent. Okay, so are you in New York now?
Yep.
Did you get to sleep? Or are you gonna sleep later?
Probably later, we'll see.
Okay, do you guys still see my screen?
Yeah, the slides.
Okay, it disappeared on me, but okay, that's good. Okay, that's great. Okay, so good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. So I'm Nancy Chen from A-STAR, Agency for Science, Technology and Research in Singapore. My research is in speech and language processing, and it has spanned across both academic and translational areas. So today I'm very happy to have this opportunity to moderate this panel discussion on funding and industry. So the ability to secure funding to financially support our work is really critical in research. And in addition, a lot of our research is motivated by real-world applications. And recently, the boundaries between academic research and industry research has also been blurring. So it's quite an interesting era with a lot of interactions that are very dynamic. So today our panelists, we have two groups. So I roughly made it into academia and industry/government. However, the boundaries between these two groups aren't so clear-cut either, because some of them, they have past experience from the other side that has helped them in their careers. So we have a very diverse group to share with us. Okay, I'm gonna move to the next slide if I can. So now that everyone can hear everyone, we'll just go through the list alphabetically, and maybe each one of the panelists can give a brief introduction of yourselves, maybe 3 to 5 sentences, so we have a little context of your background. So Melissa, you want to go first?
Hello, my name is Milica Gašić. I'm a professor in dialogue systems and machine learning at Heinrich-Heine University Düsseldorf in Germany. My research interests are broadly in dialogue systems, machine learning, and other areas that can facilitate faster and more robust learning of natural language understanding systems. Before moving to Germany, I was at the University of Cambridge for 12 years. And in the final year, I was a lecturer, and then I got 2 very large grants, which actually brought me to Germany, and I started my own research group, which is now about 10 people. Thank you.
Thank you. Jiang Jing, do you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Jing Jiang. Jing is my my first name. So yeah, I'm currently at Singapore Management University. So I've been here for over 10 years. I'm actually not from the speech community, I'm from the NLP community. But I'm very honored to be invited here by Nancy. I work on a range of different topics. Early on, I worked on social media analysis for quite a number of years. And then more recently, I started looking at question answering in the NLP community, like document-based question answering, and then and later knowledge-based question answering. And most recently, I'm venturing into multimodal question answering, like visual with visual input or video input, but that's quite at the early stage. So I don't know whether I'm an exceptional case here. I don't have industry experience, but I can certainly share some experience I had in terms of applying for grants that will benefit from having industry partners, or some projects where we had collaborations with industry or government agencies. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Preeti, you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Preeti Jyoti. I'm a faculty member in the CSE department at IIT Bombay, which is in Mumbai in India. So my research interests broadly span speech and language processing. So I've worked quite a bit on speech recognition. More recent interests are in code switching, low resource NLP, and also multimodal learning. So I'm interested in anything which has to do with low resource settings. And over the last few years, my focus has been mostly on building speech and language technologies for Indian languages, because it fits all of these boxes. And like Jingjiang, I also don't have industry experience, but I hope I'll be able to throw some light on what it's like to get funding from industry labs, being a faculty member in India, and maybe it'll translate to other locations as well. So look forward to this panel. And thanks, Nancy, for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you. Tatsuya, you want to go next?
Yes, my name is Tatsuya Kawahara. I'm a full professor of Kyoto University, and I am now appointed as a dean of the school since 2020. And I have been working for the speech, or most of the area of speech processing, including speech recognition, spoken language understanding, and spoken dialogue systems. And my career is about 30 plus years, and most of them are in academia, except that I was in Bell Labs in 1990s and a consultant at the ATR. Okay.
Thank you. Kate, you want to go next?
Yeah, hi, I'm Kate Mill. I'm a principal research associate at Cambridge University. What that means is I'm funded by soft money. I'm funded to do research primarily. I'm not a member of the faculty, although I do a bit of teaching. After a postdoc in speech at Cambridge University, I then went into industry. I worked at Nuance Communications when it was still a startup in California for about 5 years. And then I established a lab for Toshiba in Cambridge doing speech technology. And I was there for about another 10 years. And then I came back to academia. That was a move partly to enable me to work part-time so I could sort of do some parental caring, look after my parents. And I was going to stay there for a year, but that was 10 years ago. So I worked on the IARPA-funded Babel project, and now I lead a project for second language learning. So using spoken language technology for assessing the speaking proficiency and giving feedback to learners. So I basically work on all aspects of spoken language processing. And thanks, Nancy, for inviting me.
Thank you. Okay, so then now on the more industry/government side, first one is Clarence.
Okay, hi everyone. Nancy, thanks for having me. And it's great to hear from all the academic professors. What you said really excites me. And how I got onto this panel was a project that I was working with Prof. Dorian from the Singapore University of Technology and Design. We were trying to solve an issue of identifying music in public spaces and trying to use audio processing, beamforming, and also blockchain technology to try to solve this issue and allow royalty collection of music to be able to flow to the rights holders across different public spaces. So since then, we've also looked at various solutions that surround the media and tech industry. And I've also got a huge interest in AI and blockchain and how it actually links to music. So yeah, I'll be happy to cover more on this topic later. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. And then Olivia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Olivia. I'm based in Singapore, but am a native New Yorker. I'm currently head of music at Museo, but we just a couple weeks ago announced that we have been acquired by SoundCloud. So I'm kind of in two roles now. I'm director of product of music intelligence at SoundCloud as well. What we do at Museo is we use AI and machine learning to understand vast catalogs and libraries of music, whether that's by providing metadata at scale or recommendations, playlisting, all of that kind of fun stuff on how do you sort and understand millions and millions upon millions of tracks that are uploaded to the internet every day. And that's me.
Okay, thank you. Shanali.
Hi everyone. I'm Shanali and I'm the CTO of IDA Technologies. IDA is a AI and machine learning company based out of Singapore, and we develop AI solutions for life and health insurance. That's our primary, sort of product area. But my own background is that before I, ventured into this entrepreneurial journey, I used to be an academic. I was a professor of computer science at Monash University for many years. And then I was at A-Star, where I worked with Nancy. I was the head of the data science department, research department at A-Star for about 5 years as well. So yeah, so I guess I've gone from university to government R&D to now industry. And I think that's my background. Yeah. And it's great to be on this panel. And thanks, Nancy, for having me here.
Thank you. Laurie.
Hi, everybody. I'm Laurie Lamel. I'm American, but I've been living in France for a long time. So some people tell me that I now sound like I have a French accent in English. So I hope I don't have too strong of one. I've been working in the speech analysis and recognition, speech processing field in general for many, many years now. Nancy and I didn't overlap at MIT, but in the past I was at MIT. In the community, I think one of the things I'm known the most for is the TIMIT corpus that I was one of the participants for. So, and I've been involved in lots of corpus annotation and just creation and things like that, because as everyone knows, that's our fuel. And I then joined the CNRS at what was called LIMSI for quite a while ago now, and I've been there. I'm a senior research scientist there. It's a government research lab, so it's a little bit different than many other places, and it's very close to academia, I would say. One advantage we have is our salaries are paid, but we do need money for projects and to hire postdocs and PhD students and things like that. And I should probably stop because I'll go on forever. But one other thing I should say is I do wear a second hat. I consult for a company called Vocapia Research, which also has a very much academic environment that, because the people leading it have made it be that way. It's a small company. So thank you. And thank you again for inviting me for being on the panel too.
Thank you. And then Bhuvana. Do you
Thank you, Nancy. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Bhuvana. I'm based in New York. So my background is originally started life off working in signal processing and in biomedical signal processing, working with EEG signals, and landed in speech and language processing when I joined IBM Research after I graduated. And I stayed there for about 23.5 years, where I had different roles, primarily being a researcher and then leading a bunch of researchers to work on both production side of things as well as on government funded research projects. IBM Research is a place where you can serve a role as an academia type member as well as an industry participant. So I had the pleasure of writing several proposals, both to the European Union as well as to the US government agencies such as DARPA, IARPA, as well as the National Science Foundation. And so that gave me a nice intermediate role between doing something which was very much like academia, but also with the constraints of industry. Since leaving IBM Research, I've been in Google for the last 5 years, where I also serve as a principal research scientist and leading a bunch of researchers. I've been focusing lately on multilingual speech recognition. And like Preeti said, a lot of work on low resource scaling to hundreds and thousands of languages, as well as bringing together synthesis and recognition. So in a role of bringing machine learning to speech and language processing. So I think I'll stop there, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So we have a very diverse profile of different career trajectories at different stage points. So I'll start off with some questions. So the first one is, how do you get funding for your research? So this is, I guess in academia, this is quite crucial. So Melissa, do you want to go first to talk about like the 2 big grants you secured in EU?
Thank you, Nancy. So I applied for an ERC starter grant. This is 1.5 million euros. And I have to say, first time I applied, I was not successful. So it's not an easy road of getting one, and it's perfectly fine if you try and do not succeed. They generally have very low acceptance rates, so below 10%. So you can even perceive it as lottery. Next time I applied, I was actually successful, not just with that grant, but also with an Sofia Kovalevska Alexander von Humboldt grant, which is 1.6 million euros. Now that grant really requires you to move to Germany and conduct your research in Germany. So German government has this framework of trying to attract researchers from other countries to move to Germany and form their group there. And for that, they give very generous funding. Now, I have to say, although it was really hard to secure these grants, once you have these grants, you virtually have very little amount of work to do to administer the grants. So they're very flexible. So, I mean, you have to think about it. The writing of the proposals usually starts 2 years before the deadline or before you actually conduct the research. So many things change. And it's very easy to present that to the funding body and say, look, now there is this new technology out there, I want to use that and I want to pursue that. And they'll say, yeah, that's totally fine. Whereas I think if you had a different kind of grant, which is more like requires you to submit deliverables and produce something close to a product, then you're much more constrained. So this really gives you a complete liberty in pursuing your own research ideas and trying really like high risk, potentially high gain directions. So I would really suggest to anybody in academia to just go for it and do not be intimidated if you don't get it first time. Now I have to say, I do actually also think interaction with industry is very important. So I had a lot of that previously while I was in Cambridge, but most recently I have a very nice collaboration with Google, because we are limited in the amount of compute that we can have at university, and we always struggle because we need quite a lot of compute power. So I had through my connections with Google secured additional access to a Google Cloud platform, as well as had extensive negotiations in buying these services so that we can have access to Google Cloud when it's necessary, like in a run up to deadline, if you want to completely redo the experiments from scratch. I find this very, very important, and I was very pleased how much recognition Google has for work in academia and research that's taking place in academia. Usually industry likes to see the final product, something that's really tangible. and not just ideas. In this case, Google was very pleased to see some broad ideas that might or might not turn out to be good, and was ready to support that. So I think that's also good, and I think it's always also good when you're academia to think about different ways how you can support your research, because although you might have money, the money is not the only thing that you need. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Janjing, do you want to go next on, how your experience of applying for grants?
Sure, yeah. So in my case, I guess this is something maybe common in Singapore. So I think industry funding is not as much as I think there's funding from government agencies. I think just speaking from my own experience and what I observe with my colleagues, I think we generally get funded by government. So for example, in Singapore, there's NRF, National Research Foundation, that supports research in various areas, especially AI, data science, I think, which is the area where I got funding. So in this case, I think my experience is that I worked with some colleagues on a big grant. So that really helped to support my research continuously for at least 5 years. I was not the lead PI, so I think my sort of because I think at the time when I was joining the team to apply for the grant, I was I think just tenured to become an associate professor. So I found that it was really a good experience to work with some more senior people to see how the proposal for a big research program that covers various different areas, right, was formed, how different PIs or co-Is in this big grant work together to contribute different capabilities, different know-hows, right, to write big proposal that covers a big topic. In this case, this is about using data analytics for this particular grant that I was involved in. It's using data analytics to analyze both online data on social media and offline data, such as people's travel patterns or taxis, transaction data. This kind of both online and offline data to try to better understand people's behaviors and then see how data analytics can improve people's lives. So I see, I work together with colleagues who are not in, NLP or text mining, and I have colleagues working on database, data mining, and even sensing technologies, right, to work together. So I think one thing I feel I learned from this experience is that if you are if you have the opportunity to work with colleagues, right, on the big grant, then I think you really can get to see how your research, your topic really contribute to a bigger picture, right, to something of a bigger scale. And another thing I guess I want to also maybe talk about is that I think the different projects I've worked on, the funded projects I've worked on, ranges from something that's more fundamental to something more applied. So for example, for some of the funding I received, for example, like 2 grants I received from Singapore's defense DSO, National Laboratories, which is a defense sort of linked agency, right? So the projects actually really allowed me to focus on some fundamental NLP problems like information extraction, information extraction in an unsupervised manner. So it was really about developing new technologies and then publishing in top places. But I have also been involved in some more applied translational project that's more that has a shorter duration. Some was even like a year or a year and a half kind of a time frame, where it's more about like applying mature technologies to develop something that the end user may directly use, right? So so I feel that for I don't know the audience here, like if you're a junior researcher in just starting your academic life, right? So I think it's good to think about your priorities. So so I think there are grants that support fundamental research, which is excellent for if your priority is to get some fundamental research done. But as I think as you move on in your career, so at a certain stage, maybe it's more interesting or important to see how your research outputs can be really applied in a real world scenario. So that's probably when you can explore some more applied grants or translational grants that allow you to sort of test out how your technologies can be applied, right, in real world scenarios. So so I guess, yeah, that's some of my experience that I want to share with everyone.
Thank you, Jean. Yeah, thank you. So Preeti, do you want to talk about your experience? And I know you also worked with Microsoft before.
Yeah,
maybe
sure.
still, so yeah.
Yes, yeah. So mainly, I mean, there are two broad categories of sources of funding, which is probably in India, which is probably similar elsewhere as well. So one is industry research labs and government agencies. So I've been lucky to get grants from Microsoft, Google, and currently we have a large collaborative grant with IBM Research. So this is jointly with my other colleagues who work on machine learning in the CSE department. And I've also got 2 or 3 grants from the government agencies as well. So the way in which we kind of go about procuring these grants, so the industry grants, it's a little more heterogeneous. So you either, so at least for me, it has been either responding to calls for proposals from the industry labs, or you apply to things like Google's Faculty Research Award, or there are also more personalized ways in which you can look for such grants, which is that you give talks at various research labs and you get them familiar with what you're working on. And sometimes they see a natural fit in their groups with what you're working on, and then something comes out of it in terms of a grant, which is probably not very large, but it's still substantial enough to get something reasonable going. But that said, with government agencies, it's much more regimented. It's always, there are calls for proposals out and you're applying to the calls for proposals, and it's competitive, but it's not as, in India at least, it's not as competitive as it is in the European Union and the US with the NSF. But there's still, of course, a fair amount of competition. And the nature of funding, this is what both my previous panelists said, the nature of funding and what's expected to come out of the funding really depends on the source. So with industry labs, there is a fair amount of freedom and flexibility, especially if you're given an unrestricted grant, which is something that industry research labs do pretty often. And with government agencies, it's typically much more oriented towards building deliverables. And so it's a little more structured, or at least that has been my experience so far. And there are pros and cons with both modes of funding. So I don't want to take up too much time, but I just want to comment that, I mean, with working on speech and language, there's a lot of this natural synergy between industry and academia. And to make a parallel with AI winters, I mean, we really are in an AI spring or an AI summer. So it really is a good time to kind of investigate whether there are natural collaborations with various industry partners. So I'll stop there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Tatsuya, do you want to share some of your experience? I know you also had a lot of collaborations with, people that may not be directly in your area too. Right?
Yeah. So that's what I want to comment. Fortunately, I have secured big funding, mostly from the government over the past 10 or 15 years. And as you see, in the most of the countries, government makes a huge investment on the AI, artificial intelligence areas. But on the other hand, it is really difficult to get funding only on the speech or spoken dialogue system, because people regarded the speech recognition or spoken dialogue system are already done due to the prevalence of the smart speakers. So yeah, I think people, many people in our community are struggling on this dilemma. So my suggestion is that we need to make a good or big proposal with an interdisciplinary group team. So yeah, I suggest collaboration with the computer vision people or NLP people or robotics people. And we recently found that thanks to the deep learning, our methodologies are almost same between the speech and the computer visions. So they also use a transformer or attention mechanism or whatever. So we can use a similar, we can use the same toolkit or same language to make a collaboration between the different areas. So fortunately, I have been successful in collaborating with robotic people because they need robust speech recognition conversation systems. And also I think it is also important to have a good application scenario, such as healthcare or caring senior people. And overall, networking with the other areas is very, very important. So that's my, lessons.
Thank you. Kate, you want to go next? And I think you've also had experience in Toshiba, Japan. Do you want to also share some of that?
Yeah, I mean, so I was actually on a talk went to a talk last week to probationer lecturers and about going for grants. Now, there was this really key point somebody made, and that they said they literally went for 6 grants and they failed us all 6, and on the 7th they succeeded. And how they succeeded was, instead of providing a solution and looking for a problem, they got people together and found the problem and then looked for the solution. And so I thought that was really interesting thing. And generally, I think that's what's been true when I've done funding with people. We've been looking at the sort of general vision of the problem. So my current one is funded by Cambridge University Press and Assessment, and they know they want to provide automated assessment and teaching, and some of that has now happened. We've been going for 5 years, but we still have the sort of longer term goal of what that problem is and how to go about it. In terms of interacting with industry, yeah, I mean, I think the key thing is different companies will interact in different ways, and you need to sort of try and learn what works for them and who are the key people. And also a key thing is find out what your institution requires in terms of timing of funding documents. And this is one of the one of my current bases of my life is that it factor in extra time, because when you deal with companies, then you have to deal with lawyers, and company lawyers do not work quickly. So so whenever you're going for funding, do factor that in. That's what I would say.
Yes. Yeah, the legal aspect is a little trickier when it's not academic. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And then I guess on the industry side, do people want to share, how your company uses signal processing or AI, and how do you work with academia? So Clarence, you want to go next?
Hi. Yes. So I just like to share, I guess, a story that really writes on what Kate was sharing about how, the academia came together with industry to identify a problem first. So how I ended up in this space and working with Prof. Dorian from SUTD was really about this. We both have a passion for music. I know she's been analyzing like pop music and coming up with prediction algorithms with AI. And so I got connected with her, and we started looking at what are some of the main problems. And one of the things here in Singapore is the royalty collection, especially for music in public spaces. It's a very manual process, and you're counting on venue owners to send Excel spreadsheets of what they play every month, which never happens. And so, there was this problem of identifying music, and also to reward creators and composers of those music with royalty fees. So what we did was to collaborate on a solution with her research department, and we developed this project called 20 Hertz, which was a pilot project where we used a bunch of things. Firstly, some audio processing to be able to identify the music, a bit like Shazam, but always on device that basically can be placed anywhere. And we also used things like a mesh technology, such that for places which didn't have Wi-Fi, our devices can actually connect with each other and leverage on that Wi-Fi to be able to capture music that's being played in different spaces. And also using beamforming, because in a shop space, sometimes there's a lot of different noise coming from different places. So we were able to program something that was able to kind of intelligently identify sounds that were nearest. And regardless of where you place the device, it could kind of identify the songs. And that went into we worked with ACR on the music identification. And then that went into Hyperledger. We worked with the framework that was produced by the Linux Foundation on the blockchain side of things, so that labels who wanted to verify the music that's being played, or the artists themselves had a very easy way to be able to identify it. And they could also run nodes that allowed them to be able to get access to that data. So this is an example of a pilot project that we are implementing. And the other point I'd like to make is also working together with some of the legal and the legal aspects of things. So in Singapore, something that's quite unique, which made our project a little bit more appealing, was because in the Intellectual Property Office of Singapore, the past few years has been looking to tighten up on this area. So especially regulating a lot of the collection societies and trying to make the dispersion of payments to the composers more transparent. So by riding alongside this this shift in the legal perimeters, we were able to get a lot more eyeballs and support for this project, because it was kind of at the right time and the right place. So I would say, in terms of getting support for projects, be it funding or even PR and general interest in the project, I think it's also good to look at some of the shifts in the regulatory and the legislative space as well. I think that plays a huge part and in bringing the technology into common usage.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, and next, Olivia, do you want to share some of your experience and how you work with academia, and also how your company uses AI?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So what we do is essentially solve the problem of massive amounts of music that are uploaded to the internet each day. 15, 20 years ago, when it was just physical CDs, there were maybe 10 releases a week. Now there's 60,000 songs uploaded a day to Spotify. So how do you manage this amount of content and music? So what we've done is created an AI that can understand music in a lot of different ways. So for example, in the production of metadata, which is what we call tagging, we can understand the genre, the vocal register, the mood, the BPM, the key. It's really endless. We say what the human ear can hear, we can teach an AI. So we also work with AI for tagging, but then also audio reference search, playlisting, recommendations, as well as creating a model that can find the next potential hit in a catalog of music. So if you have 100,000 songs in your catalog, the AI will scan the 100,000 songs and say, these are the ones that have the highest likelihood of commercial virality. In terms of how we connect and work with academia, I would say it's more on the side of the people that we bring in to work on projects. So as head of music, my team is responsible for working with our AI team to help to essentially create the brain of the AI. I'm non-technical. Everyone else on my team, on the music team, we're all music people. We're not we don't have computer science degrees. So then the AI team, they're more, on the machine learning side and creating the models and infrastructure. So we work together really, really closely. For example, when we're putting together a new classifier, which is a new way for the AI to listen to music, we want to be sure that we're giving it the right information. So we bring on a lot of different people for these types of projects, whether it's students or composers or music bloggers, all of these different types of people that can collaborate on certain definitions, on creating data sets that we essentially then feed the AI. So how we work with academia is more on the kind of the people that we bring into the projects and all of the information that we can kind of create collaboratively so that we can be sure that what we're, the information that we're essentially giving to the AI is as correct as possible. And when I say correct, something that we have, that we say a lot at Museo is there can be something that's technically true, but practically correct. So for example, with something like moods, you can say that there's, from the music technical side, you can say minor chords are sad, major chords are happy, and then you train the AI that way. And that's really impractical, actually, because it's not a binary, it's not really like a binary kind of challenge. Mood is a full spectrum. So how can we take kind of technically true music knowledge and make it into something that's practically correct? A lot of the people that we sell to and work with are not technical people. They're not in machine learning or AI, they're music people. So it's how can we kind of humanize the machine learning and make it practical for the industry. So I hope that helped to answer.
Thank you. Shanali, do you want to share some of your experience of how your past research career helps your experience now in industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually going to answer your first question. You're not asking me that question, which I will. I thought I'll just share a little bit about what I think about getting funding when I was an academic and in research, right? I think I learned a lot of things along the way. And as a young researcher, I think one of the things that I would like to, pass on to my younger colleagues is to basically draw on senior colleagues' experience, right? So when you're writing grant proposals, do find mentors who can comment on it if these are the first proposals that you're writing, because honestly, the advice that you get can help to significantly improve your chances of success. And I say this because the first grant proposal I wrote when I was a postdoc, I just finished my PhD in Australia, I had a senior colleague who looked at it and she just made some changes, but one of the changes was very significant. She said, don't apply as a principal investigator. Go put yourself as up for an Australian postdoctoral fellowship, right? So this is like something which pays for your salary for the next 3 years, and you can go to any university you want and so on. So I mean, that one thing changed almost my own start to my research career, because instead of getting a grant where I was just a principal investigator, I actually got myself an ARC, Australian Research Council fellowship. And that really gave me a lot more freedom and flexibility in the early stages of my career. I mean, this is the kind of thing as a young researcher, I did not know, it was really a senior colleague who helped shape that. The second is, I think we tend to think of fundamental research and industry research as separate things because of the sources of funding that we get this money from. In my lifetime, I think I found that they are not always so separate. If it is possible to work with an industry partner addressing a problem, but in the course of doing that research, if you can actually solve some fundamental problems, then you're hitting two birds with one stone, right? And then this sort of is a feedback loop, because in this problem, you're not just taking what you have and applying it, you're actually developing new methodologies in the course of applying problems. And once we start seeing things like that, then it's very satisfying because you don't have to separate out what you do as something that's solving a problem in the real world versus something that's fundamental, right? I mean, and I think that sort of research, for me at least, was very exciting. And that's one way of looking at it, because sometimes industry or government funding might be a little bit less competitive than the pure fundamental research in terms of getting approvals and getting the funding. But then you can use that to build your own fundamental research as well. You don't have to see it as so disconnected. The last was, I think, maybe it's not so much for the younger colleagues, but as one of the things that I learned when I was an A-STAR, the Agency for Science, Technology and Research, was that sometimes we think of getting funding purely for a specific project, and that's the traditional mechanism. But when I was at A-STAR, we also developed this other very interesting construct of what we called a research lab, which is really a collaborative research program where you don't so specifically define the problem, but you bring together a set of people from, let's say, an industry partner and a research group, and you're broadly looking at solving problems for that industry using specific research methodologies. So let's say if we were interested in AI for banking specifically, then you would have a joint lab with a bank, and you would really look at what are their current business processes and how can research and technology in artificial intelligence and machine learning achieve a quantum leap or improvement in their processes and so on. And this kind of approach can be seen by certain organizations as very strategic as well. So if you can find an industry partner like that, where you can do something more holistic, then that's gives you a lot more flexibility in how you attract funding through that mechanism as well. I mean, these are just 2 or 3 points that I wanted to sort of say in terms of how one might think about funding. The last point is you really must look at how the proposal is going to be evaluated. What do these people who are giving you the money, what are they looking for? What do they really weight as important? And you must prepare your proposals to have the maximum impact on that front, right? Because if application is important, then you must bring in application partners. If career experience is important, you must have senior colleagues in there, and so on. If track record is going to be one of the main criteria, then have the people who complement what you might not have at that stage to improve the success of this funding, right? I mean, or success of getting this funding. I think that's probably for the first question. For the second question, we are a small startup, and we actually have a lot of researchers in the company because a lot of them are colleagues from academia or research who are actually part of this venture. But one of the big differences for me, I find, is that in this cycle of where I am right now, developing technologies, AI technologies for, let's say, a specific industry, I think you have to be a large organization which can work with academia, because sometimes I find that the timelines for academic research, which I myself used to look at, looking at 1 year, 2 years, for a young company like ourselves, those timelines are way too long. I mean, we need to solve problems now, and we need to innovate now in solving some of those problems. So I think one of the things maybe academia needs to think about is how can there be more flexible collaboration mechanisms with not the Googles and the Microsofts of the world, which can wait for 2 years for a wonderful algorithm to be developed. But for maybe some of the smaller companies, can there be shorter innovation cycles? And I haven't got a solution to that. I'm just throwing it out. Yeah. Thanks, Nancy.
No, thank you, Shonali. Yeah. So Lori, do you want to talk about some of your experience? And you have I guess you were on different US grants, although you were in France, and also you have different hats that you're wearing. Some are more industry oriented.
Yeah. As I said earlier, is that the industry is also, it's a small company that does very researchy type applications, and So it's very much the same type of feeling and a very academic feeling in both. One thing I didn't add before is that when I'm now at Listen, and Listen is actually a mixed university CNRS lab. And so we were forced to merge with the university, which actually is probably good for us. But in any case, we're now like half academic and half government, so I'm not sure how to count it. But you brought up one point there that having American contracts, for example, is very, very difficult for being in a government research lab, because the French government is not going to sign something abiding by what the US government wants to impose and things like that. And the only way to be able to do this was to be a subcontractor of an American company. And in fact, sometimes we were a subcontractor of the small company Vocabulary Research in France, because it just simplified things a lot. And so that was actually a really nice working relationship. And it's the same thing even with some of the larger companies in France. Sometimes it's difficult to have an agreement between the research lab and large companies, because both of them are very bureaucratic. Yet a smaller company is a little bit more flexible. Or even getting into that, if you want to buy something at a research lab, or at least some of the larger companies, you have to go through all these chains of approval to be able to buy, I don't know, a cable or a microphone or something. And at the small company, at least the one that I've been consulting for, you just go to the boss and say, hey, we need this cable to connect this to this. Can you buy it? And he says, yeah, order it, and you get it delivered the next day. And so there's a lot of differences between them. I think the combination, some of the things that Shonali said, I think are really important. In fact, projects that we've had French national projects, we've had local projects, we've had the US projects, as you mentioned, we've had European for a while, we had lots of European projects, and all of them have different criteria that are used to evaluate them. So it's really important that you know what the criteria are when you write your proposal. And so people, and something else that's really good to do once you get to be senior enough, is to serve as an evaluator of the projects. And then you know exactly what they're looking for. And so basically, at least in certain cases, people have to complete a form evaluating the project. And if you make their life easier, giving them the responses to the questions that are being asked, how does this contribute to society? How does this what are the main innovative aspects? They can just fill out their report more easily. They don't have to look and try and figure out what's innovative in your proposal. And so those type of things are really important. It's actually a really good experience to do the expertise from the other side. And usually academics are the evaluating organizations are very happy to take academics because they consider this less of a conflict of interest. So that's something good to do. And I guess that's about it. I don't know if you had other specific things in mind. Over the years, we had many, many different types of contracts, some of which are more oriented towards producing something now. Others are more long-term research. Oh, that's something else you can do, is you can have, like a large company can have, or a large company and smaller companies can have some things that are delivered that are short-term and some things that are longer term. And oftentimes, for example, a PhD thesis or a postdoc will be supported at the research lab to do more of the long-term research, yet the companies themselves are working on shorter-term applications that hopefully can incorporate the longer-term research in a couple of years. So I guess that's about it.
Okay, thank you, Laurie. Bhuvana, you want to go next? I guess your experience is more with bigger companies.
Sure. Let me answer the second question first. You asked about how signal processing is applied to the various technologies we work with. I work in speech and language processing, and I cannot emphasize how much the signal processing component comes into play there, starting from how you extract features from the signal to further develop models based on these extracted representations, whether it's speech or whether it's video or text, or you're doing multilingual, multimodal work. And it's kind of interesting because wearing my IEEE hat, all of this started with the Signal Processing Society. And what machine learning has now picked up is essentially the fundamental theories and other components that started with life in signal processing. A lot of time we get asked the question, so how does the IEEE Signal Processing Society contribute to machine learning? Or how does it contribute to the current technologies? And it's if you look at the history and if you look at what's happening, it's the same researchers who are working in this field who started life as in signal processing, and the same algorithms and the same techniques which was once applied to statistical models and now applied to neural networks, or different ways of solving the same problem, different models, but using similar techniques. So given that I work in speech processing, we apply many of these to noise robustness, robustness to different acoustic and speaker characteristics, and on the synthesis side of things to make things sound as natural and human sounding as possible. And if you marry the two, how can both technologies benefit from each other and help other downstream processing technologies like we heard about today, like different forms of natural language processing? To address a little bit of the first question on the funding side of things, I think different companies play this space very, very differently. In general, there is a lot of desire to have a collaboration with universities, both professors as well as with students. Professors from the point of view of their ability to do long-term research and to really think about something very far without having to worry about immediate results. Because that's not always, you don't always have that luxury of doing this in the industry. So professors who are interested in going to the big players for funding can keep this at the back of their minds. But it also helps if a portion of it, or if it is a gradual type of research where there is something that can be applied to short-term challenges and problems the industry sees today. So as a background check, I'd probably suggest that you first find out what are the challenges and problems an industry is facing, probably by looking at their products and what's missing in the products. At least coming from speech processing, we all know when things fail with different accents, or it doesn't work for some particular language very well as opposed to another language and so on. So this kind of thing goes a long way when you apply for funding to industry and with their various programs, and they are pretty diverse set of programs. For example, you can be a visiting faculty researcher, you can be a part of a faculty research award that many people talked about. You could get benefits from just compute units, which is the cloud computing unit from, I think both Amazon and Google offer the same type of, maybe even Microsoft does this. And then you can also have the whole student partnerships where you have internship programs, you have student PhD fellowships, you have student awards, and you also have other forms of part-time collaborations with faculty and students. So it's a wide spectrum, and depending on what's most useful to the particular faculty member and the collaboration works with a particular university, I think it goes a long way. There's also separate university tie-ups, which happens with certain top universities, and this allows the industry to cherry pick specific areas of research, which may not happen in various other research groups as well. I've also written some proposals, and I think a few people alluded to it, that it's more important to have a solution to an existing problem rather than find a solution in search of a problem. That's sort of a little bit contradictory to what academia likes to do, because you like to explore long-term research, but there's always a way to present these things. So people who are viewing the proposal can actually see the merit of it. And it's very important to collaborate with complementary partners, be it from industry or other university, because it brings strength to the proposal on how what you're developing or what you're researching on can apply to multiple fields. And this we see in a lot of both the EU and the US funded proposal. I'm not so sure about the Asian ones, but definitely on the Western side, a mixture makes a big difference. And that's what I've seen in all the proposals I've written. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you. I guess another question that we might want to ask is related to diversity, of how your company promotes diversity and how that might have benefited the company and yourself. And I guess academia could also have this question too. So don't know if anyone wants to go first.
I can start again the round.
Sure, go ahead.
So I'm very happy to report that one of my first hires was a female postdoc, and I actually offered her a dual career option. So this is not normally the case for postdocs. Usually this happens, at least in Germany and continental Europe, on a more of a professorship level. But in their case, indeed was the case that they're both from related areas. I mean, not quite the same, but her partner was willing to switch to dialogue. And I mean, this worked extremely well for both me and them. So I could not have been happier, just as a first hire, to get 2 postdocs, especially nowadays in this atmosphere when it's like really hard to acquire postdocs in academia, when like places like Google and Amazon and others are offering so much more money. There are a lot of things one can do in addition. So for example, in Germany, there are very strict rules on how much salary you're allowed to offer somebody. And unfortunately, if you had funding, like a scholarship during your PhD versus being employed during your PhD, you end up on very different scales, and which everybody agrees it's unfair, but nobody has the power to change. So what I did, I promoted my female postdoc to the level where she is almost like an independent researcher, and she actually has the highest pay scale of everybody in the group at the moment. And I think it's, in my mind, it's much more important to do something concrete for diversity than to actually just go around and say, oh, we really need to do something, there are not enough women, and say how hard it was for me to be where I am now. I think that really doesn't help anybody. I think what really does help are concrete plans. And yeah, I was very happy also that I managed to hire a very diverse research group that basically comprises of people from almost every continent and background, and it just brings so much diversity in the group, not just in the level of education and backgrounds, but also linguistically, culturally, and this really I find very, very important for success. And I personally was oftentimes confronted with various challenges, and many times addressed as dear Mr. blah blah, because nobody really thought that there would be such thing as a professor and being female. And also various kinds of hidden misogyny and various other nasty things. But what I find important is just not to give up, and to look at that as something which will soon become a matter of past. And yeah, just go on, do your own thing. But when you do your own thing, you really do it according to your own rules. And yeah, if there is a female researcher you want to employ, you go and find all the ways that you have to and all the fights that you have to fight in order to make sure that that person actually will feel happy in this research environment, which still unfortunately is very much like one-sided, be it male or white or whatever you want to look at it. It's very dominated by one group, and I think we need to change that by doing something concrete.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Anyone else want to share some some experience in how diversity has helped you. And then, yeah, and then another thing is the audience, you can start asking questions through the chat. So yeah, please start.
Okay, great. So I mentioned before that in one of the ways that we tap into academia is when we're building new ways for our AI to listen to music. And that is, diversity is equally important in that conversation. So Museo is a startup, well, we were until about 2 weeks ago, of 12 people and 8 nationalities. So we have a hugely, if just even for a team of 12, global team. And I think when you're working with something like music, you have to have those global perspectives. So for example, of course, I'm American, I'm also half French, I'm Western, that's my perspective. There's no way I know what's going on in the music industry in detail in India, in Brazil, and all of these other places. So we need that type of global diversity when it comes to music. And we're always very upfront saying, we've built this from a Western commercial perspective. We're missing a lot of information, like, Brazilian funk or whatever it is, the kind of, I think one of the biggest emerging genres on SoundCloud right now is like Egyptian hip hop. We don't have anybody from Egypt on our team, but when we do work on global projects, we always bring in local experts. So we were working on a project around artist discovery with the brand Vans, and we needed, we were getting, it was a competition, so we were getting submissions for everywhere from Korea, India, Indonesia. So we bring people on from those places who understand the market, who understand the trends, who understand the lyrics and all of the different connotations. So I think it's also about understanding where you're kind of lacking in the diversity and being upfront about it, and not kind of shying away and saying, oh, but we can figure it out, we know music. No, it's completely different all over the world. So embrace, that those differences, and also see them as an opportunity to expand your team or to work with people who may know, in something that's different from you. Like we were working on a project with a streaming company in India. And luckily, one of our, developers is from India, and we were able to just say, like, how is our technology doing on these songs? Even just that quick kind of sanity check with somebody on the team who's from a different culture is really helpful to be able to do, which we wouldn't be able to do if we were all, European or American or whatever. So yeah, having those different global perspectives is really important, and it has helped us tremendously as well.
Thank you, Olivia. So I have a question that was sent in privately. So if you could do everything all over again in your academic career, what would you change? Do we have volunteers for this, or? Hi, Shanali.
Actually, I wouldn't change anything, because I think that, the whole point about academia or any life experience is to just go with the flow. Hindsight is a great thing. One could have done some things better. But I think when I look back, I don't really regret any of the things that I did. But there might be one or two things that I might not have done that I might look back and say, why didn't I do it? So I think it's more about doing all the things that you feel like doing and you think are important and you really passionately believe is important. And I think if you did that, then you wouldn't want to change too many things when you look back, right? I think that's just a point. When someone asks me, do you want to change something? It's more about saying, do all the things that you feel passionate about, then you won't feel like changing anything. Even if you succeed or fail, it wouldn't matter.
Okay, thank you, Shanali. Anyone else want to share some?
This is not really something different in my career, but I think something that's really important to do when you're younger and you tend to lose sight of this is to keep some time for yourself. So do some sport, do some travel, do whatever. Don't let your work be just your entire life. And sometimes you have a family, sometimes you don't, or at least your family might not be near you. But it's really important to keep something for yourself. And the people that I know that seem to have the most balanced life as they get older in their careers are those that did keep some time for themselves, and they didn't just only do work. I mean, we all have deadlines, we all do all-nighters, or Ruvana, you're still there in the middle of the night to participate in this, but I think it's really important. And this is something I tell many of the younger students and the postdocs that I work with, is that yes, it's really important to work hard, but also keep some time for yourself, because that's really important, so you don't feel torn in all directions. So I'm not sure that's really exactly what you meant by the question, but I think it's really important.
And I think, yeah, this is very wise advice that maybe very young students should bear in mind. Yeah. Yes, thank you. Any other perspectives that anyone wants to share?
Sorry.
Sure, please go ahead.
Yeah,
After you, Preeti, after you. I already said a lot of things.
So I was just going to say, I don't know if it's about if I had a do-over, if I would do it differently. But one thing which, so there's this large phase shift when you go from being a student or a postdoc where you're working with a mentor to becoming an assistant professor where you're driving your own agenda. And there are lots of kind of managerial aspects to the job, which at least I didn't actively plan for. So I think that's one thing. And this is also what kind of related to what Laurie said in terms of being more organized about, actively blocking out slots for things that you want to do, including spending time with family and also doing other activities. And also, so as an assistant professor, maybe people have a notion that the majority of your day is just academic activities, but as you kind of grow in your career, there's lots of non-academic activities and admin related activities also, which will consume a lot of your time. So I think this is something to kind of keep in mind while you're planning your day-to-day agendas. This is not something that I actively thought about at all, and just organically kind of went through the kind of day-to-day activity. So maybe, I mean, thinking about this more and being more organized about it would be a piece of advice I would give young researchers. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I have similar thoughts about this aspect as well.
Maybe if I could just add one thing to that, what I would do differently. I think it's useful for postdocs among the audience. I think it's very important to try to become independent as early as possible. So the first time that it occurred to me that I can write my own grant proposal is when we received a review on the grant proposal where I was named as a postdoc, and the reviewer wrote, "Why am I not a PI on this grant?" Because I have everything that's necessary to actually conduct my own project. And this never occurs to me. I mean, I never really considered that. I never thought of myself as actually being capable of doing that. And I think it's really important to recognize your abilities early on and not wait until actually the reviewer comes back and say, look, come on, apply for your own funding. And I know it's very difficult and can be very demotivating in academia because you're writing these papers, especially nowadays with this double-blind reviews, ARR system, like you get sometimes very nasty comments that can be quite demotivating, and it's very easy to feel down and not to think highly of yourself. But actually, after you've done 1 or 2 postdocs, I'm sure you are all capable to submit a grant proposal, or at least try go for one. And yeah, that would be my advice.
Thank you, Melissa.
I just wanted to add that organizations are as important as individuals, and choice of where you work and who you work with can really make or, feel like your career is exciting or it's really terrible and you're really down about it, because who you work with just makes such a big difference. And I think like certain organizations are, much more, pay a lot more attention to diversity, equity, understand, the point that Laurie was making, that as a woman, at some points of time in your career, you might need to take some time off your career when you have very young children and you need to, look after young families and you need to put so much more time into that. And I think certain organizations support people a lot better than other organizations. And certain mentors are much more, play a much bigger role and give you a lot more time and so on. So find people who are nice to work with, because then life is, research is fun and life is, enjoyable. That's something that we should all remember, because if you're working with someone who doesn't, or you're in a team that's not supportive, then find teams which are different, because I think then you'll find that as you move in your career, life is a lot easier. I mean, that's something that I would probably want to, sort of share.
Thank you. I can add one thing. I would say, not in terms of something done differently, but something that really helped me was, as a student, reaching out to people in the industry for research, right? Being like, I'm doing a project, I'd love to interview you. People are going to respond to you as a student, but definitely not necessarily as a career seeker sometimes, depending on what industry you're getting into. Music industry is notoriously difficult to break into. So I used my time as a student, whether it was writing my thesis or whatever it was, to make connections in the industry that I wanted to get into. So reaching out kind of as a researcher or as a student, you'll be able to get your foot in the door much easier than when you're on the hunt for a job. And that really helped me.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. And I think just want to jump on the point that Olivia said. I think sometimes going to companies which work with a large gamut of the industry would help. So for example, Bandwagon, actually our primary business is in media. So if there's anything to do with signal processing that you feel you want to work with a label or a particular government organization, companies like us, we can help to link you up with other industry people that you may need to, you want to work with to kind of hash out certain problems. Or actually, we ourselves are very interested with anything in this area that concerning music. So our door is always open. We love to kind of work with academia to kind of push technology and ultimately to kind of make a difference to music fans worldwide.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let me take a look. Oh, I missed this one. So this one is on the pros and cons of the different types of funding sources that you get. Do people want to share a little bit of their experience? Preeti and Bhuvana. Preeti, I think you touched on this a little bit, but you didn't elaborate. And Bhuvana, I guess, also touched a little bit. Do you two want to elaborate a bit?
Yeah, sure. So from industry labs, at least what I've got so far, I mean, they're unrestricted grants. So this is kind of, it maxes out in terms of the amount of freedom you have. In the choice of problems. So you write a proposal and roughly you kind of abide by the goals and objectives which are stated in the proposal, but beyond that you have complete freedom. And usually when it comes to unrestricted grants, the companies just ask that they be acknowledged if anything concrete comes out of it, be it paper, stocks, whatever it is. But beyond that, there isn't anything else. There are no other kind of, there's nothing else binding. And then there are other more collaborative grants, like the one we currently have with IBM Research, where there are researchers from the lab who are actively involved in the collaboration. And so then here, again, there is a fair amount of freedom in the problem statements that you're devising, but it is molded a bit by what the company is eventually interested in as well. And of course, we only kind of go forward if there is mutual interest. But here, there is a lot of active participation from researchers in the lab as well. And so these are kind of the two modes, at least that I've been involved with research labs. And with government projects, there are always deliverables involved, and it's much more regimented in terms of what is expected in terms of reports, and there are periodic reports which are expected. And so there's a lot more kind of accountability. And I think there are pros and cons to both. I mean, pros, of course, with the unrestricted grants is that there is minimal supervision and there's just complete freedom in what you're allowed to explore. And with the government related projects, with the deliverables, I mean, sometimes it can be a pain that you have to keep periodically writing reports and so on. But I think the pro is that you're really forced to think about how this deliverable should work eventually. And if it's not working, there'll be these minor pain points. You're really forced to think about those things. And I think that's good, especially as applied researchers. If you're in this unrestricted full freedom mode, you tend to kind of gloss over the finer details, but you're forced to think about it when you're in this kind of very deliverable oriented mode, and which Professor Kate mentioned as well with the IARPA and DARPA grants. There's a lot of kind of emphasis on this, which I think kind of forces you to think a little more deeply about how robust the systems are, and not just think narrowly in terms of metrics, and does it more broadly kind of generalize. So I think, yeah, I'll let Bhuvana add more.
Just to add to what Preeti said, one critical component that comes into play is IP. Who owns the IP of what's developed in this grant, right? And that's where the slowness with legal comes into play that Kate alluded to earlier. And if it comes around in a full circle to what is the area of research you're doing and how much of it is directly coinciding with what the researchers are working on. And when you try to work out these faculty partnerships and university relations, you iron out clearly who owns the IP. And there are different ways people do it. IBM does it differently, and I've seen Google do it very differently. And that's very important because that either gives you a lot of freedom but doesn't give you any freedom, right? And people are generally good about doing these joint IPs, but what exactly does joint IP mean is a completely different story, because many universities have these incubators. They want to take an idea they develop and make like a startup of their own and fund their own professors and so on. And that's when a huge problem arises, because that's not something the company wants. One of the reasons they're funding this particular faculty member is for either their students or to have a good collaboration going with the university in general. So these are all tricky points. There's no universal answer, but it's all can be resolved on a one-on-one basis. And usually it gets resolved because there's somebody in that industrial lab who wants to collaborate with this particular faculty member or in this area of research. And you need to push, and nothing comes for free. Nothing is easy. It requires a lot of effort on different fronts from everyone. So as long as I think there's interest and there's a will, there's always a way. May not be the exact way you were thinking of when you wrote the proposal, but eventually you can get something to work out.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess, Kate, you also mentioned some aspects of the legal terms. I don't know if you have anything to elaborate on this front.
No, just by experience is that some of it's IP, but just some companies, lawyers. And the other thing is, generally, if you're dealing with an international company, even if you may be dealing with a local branch of that company, you may find that their lawyers are in a different country with a different set of laws. So you've got this pool that the legal agreement has to be for your country, but the lawyers advising it are in a completely different country and may not be familiar with it. So that can also slow things down as well.
I see. Okay, thank you. Tatsuya, do you have any, and Janjin, do you have any final advice for our students?
Yeah, I have a similar comment that the one thing from academia is freedom is most important because our purpose is to make a, publish a paper and make innovation to the world. So my top priority is secure freedom, even when company provides funding. So in that sense, the direction of we need to share this concept, and of course we need to give something to the company, but it is important to get agreement and get the agreement on the direction of the research.
Okay, thank you. Jing, do you want to share some final advice?
Oh, yeah, I guess earlier I also just briefly mentioned that I think personally I feel that I guess because of the funding landscape in Singapore, I feel that for junior faculty members, you might want to seriously think about, during what's the current at the current stage of your career, what's the priority, right? So I think several people mentioned that depending on the funding source or the deliverables, some allow you more freedom in terms of carrying out your own research agenda, or some may have certain expectations. In my case, I participate in certain short-term projects that really, expect you to deliver something tangible, right? So, but that may not be. So I did that only when I think at the sort of later stage of my career, where I do have some sort of free time to venture into the more applied side of the technologies. So I think, yeah. So one thing I think to keep in mind is, depending on the stage of your career and what your priorities are, like you may want to choose the funding source that apply for grants selectively. Yeah.
Thank you. So I think we're about time's up. So, but yeah, thank you so much for all the 10 panelists that are from different geographical regions and from different stages in their career and shared different types of advice. I personally learned a lot, and I believe the students and postdocs here also. So I believe if you have more questions, we can also bring it offline. So we will, now I'll pass it to Harry for our closing ceremony. Our closing remarks, yeah.
Thank you, Nancy, for organizing this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for joining. Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Nancy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I would request all of you to stay back. So thank you all. So before I share my thoughts, I would first like to invite Professor Farooq, who has been spearheading this whole progress even for the last a few occasions. So first comments from Farooq.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Nancy, for everything here. So I have a couple of final words to say, and I think I'll keep it quick. So I just want to emphasize that at Progress, I just want to share my opinion. So at Progress, we appreciate and want to celebrate and promote diversity. Diversity has many dimensions and directions, as we talked today, some of which intersect and some of them don't. To name a few, and this is not a complete list, at Progress, we would like to focus on diversity concerns related to race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, language, culture, religion, ability and or disability status, immigration status, and so on and so forth. So definition of diversity is not universal, as each geographical boundary has placed a specific limitation on a particular group of people. At Progress, we would like to discuss these boundary conditions and brainstorm ways that we can promote diversity in academia. Progress targets all spectrum of students, from undergraduate to postdoctoral researcher. We invite superstars in academia to share their experiences of success, but not just success, also the fight that they have put out to break the imposed boundary conditions. Dear friends, colleagues, students, I suggest we name ourselves progressors. Yes, it may sound cliche, but let it be. We need to meet more, talk more, brainstorm more, and learn and learn and learn more. This year, we have added a new integral part to our progress journey by including LGBTQ+ panel, and this is just a start. We need you to attend, to contribute, and to disseminate the message. Dear progressors, as one of the chairs of the event, it has been an honor to be here with you. I would like to thank Signal Processing Society, specifically our president, Athena Petropoulou, who is the founder of Progress. I would like to thank all our organization committee members, Nancy, Harry, Vesna, and everyone. It has been a tremendous pleasure to work with you all. And I would like to thank Bilene and CMS for helping us to make this happen. Let us all focus on reducing disparities in opportunities, experiences, and outcomes for all members of Signal Processing Society and broadly in engineering and science. Let us all challenge the imposed boundary conditions, and let us all promote diversity and progress. So please don't forget, we have a survey, and fill it out and stay in touch. Cheers to all of you, and thanks again. That concludes my talk.
Thank you very much,
Thank you, Farouk. Thank you.
So next, I would like to invite Professor Petros Paragos, who is the General Co-Chair of ICASSP 2023 next year. And he has been attending the event today after arriving into Singapore. So may I request him to say a few words about the next progress event at ICASSP 2023.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me, please?
Yes.
Yes. Right. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to attend the Progress workshop. I enjoyed very much all its presentations, both in terms of the scientific content as well as the diversity of their topics and the socially responsible directions promoted in the workshop. As Harry mentioned, I'm serving as the General Chair of next year's ICASSP 2023, which will take place on Rhodes Island in Greece. Rhodes Island is a beautiful island located in the southeast Aegean archipelagos at the crossroads of three continents. It has a rich history. It has experienced many civilizations and ethnicities. And nowadays, it features a cosmopolitan lifestyle, people from many countries, and nice places to visit, historic tours, and many Mediterranean attractions. It will be held in person. We're happy for that, and we're actually working very hard because this next year's ICASSP will be the first post-pandemic ICASSP that will give us the opportunity to all, be together in person since 2019, which was the last time. At the same time, it coincides with the 75th anniversary of the Signal Processing Society. So we're happy to celebrate both of these events, and so on behalf then of the whole organizing committee, I'm very glad to invite all of you next year's Progress workshop that will be hosted by ICASSP in Rhodes in person. Some special new features of next year's ICASSP, which we are organizing and which I think are very compatible and welcoming for Progress, are the following two. Where for the first time we're organizing satellite events like thematic workshops and short courses. And both of these events are aiming to enrich the program and at the same time to attract a wide audience and provide inclusivity for students and young professionals. So I think this will go very, very well along with progress. So in summary, I guess we're working very hard to develop a scientific and social program for next year's ICASSP, which you will all enjoy. We warmly invite you, all of you, join us next year, both for the Progress Workshop as well as for the whole ICASSP in Rhodes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Maragall. Okay, so I think we had a very, I would say, an enriching experience at Progress the last 2 days. So just would like to share some thoughts in addition to what Farokh said, and some of them may be a repetition of what he said. So SPS is committed to diversity and inclusion, and Progress has been a pioneering initiative initiated by the passion of our SPS president, current president, Athena, to help demonstrate our commitment in some sense in action. So our experience from the first few Progress events has been very encouraging, and we think that it is a sustainable initiative that will continue to serve as a platform where more and more people will interact to understand each other for the common good for everyone. So it is my pleasure to thank all the speakers, panelists, and chairs of the sessions who have taken their time and share their valuable thoughts with everyone. In particular, I'd like to thank Nancy and Farokh for spending enormous amount of time and effort, all the members of the organizing committee of Progress, Belen and her team for handling the logistics, and to all our attendees who made the event truly interactive. And I hope that they will spread the word about Progress amongst their social networks. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. For people in Singapore, see you at the reception.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, bye,
Don't
everyone.
forget the survey.
Yeah. The link, is it out?
It should be going out very shortly.
Okay. Should we also paste it here? Oh, in case. Or yeah, maybe email is better.
Yeah.
Or
Go out to the students. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.